I think most people are still not up to date with the technology. You know, I was listening to an old session that I did with a client years ago, and there was something that we talked about which resonated with this idea, and a lot of a lot of things that something's good when it was true and it still is true. Right? It doesn't change. You know it's good. Yeah. And we were talking about the idea of the fact that everybody's an expert on something, and yet what that really means is there's a lot that they don't know, because, and then the idea is basically understood that if you work in a company and you have a job, you should be good at that job. But if you try to work in another position in the company, you might be absolutely terrible because each position is slightly different. And for example, if you've got a big company with big offices, most people cannot do what the person in the next office is doing because they've got unique skills that specifically orientate towards one task. It's the compartmentalization of everything, and as a result, people very often only perform the tasks that they're told to do, and they don't experiment very much. And it's only experimentation that takes things forward. And naturally, companies are a little bit worried about people being too independent and doing something that will upset everybody, because it's very easy to make people unhappy in the modern world. You know, it would not, for example, it would not surprise me if the major companies all sent out backgrounds to their clients that were to their employees that were like Ukrainian flags, right? Because it's extremely popular in the West to put Ukrainian flags everywhere, to have them in your bio on Twitter or LinkedIn, to say that this is something that you support, which I find quite interesting. And it's really what's called virtue signaling. Most people don't know what they're talking about. You know, maybe you drive a Volkswagen car, but you don't know anything about the company or their history, if you know what I mean. Yeah. Which might be a good or a bad thing. I mean, Volkswagen cars are good cars. Even even though they come from the National Socialist Party and that party's agendas pre-World War II, but that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter much, I think, anymore. But you know, knowing history is important. So it's interesting. Me being me, every time I see a Ukrainian flag somewhere, I always want to put a Russian flag somewhere. I'm like, okay, let's balance it out. Let's have one of each flag, and and we can have all the equality. There's massive international pressure to make life very difficult for Russia at the moment. Yeah, I was surprised to learn the other day that the largest games platform on the internet is called Steam. I don't know if you're aware of that. There's a couple. There's Epic Games and Xbox have a platform, but Steam is the largest in the world. And I was really shocked. What Steam did was remove any games from Russian companies or that used Russian developers. They removed the games from their platform. And then I was thinking about I mean, these are jobs for people, right? I mean, if you're in some part of Russia and maybe the economics is already not great for you, and you're a developer and you're working in technology, well, Steam just removed your job, basically. And punishing people because you don't like the administration is completely irrational in terms of a way to deal with the problem. It's like punishing the wrong person. Yeah. Anyway, there's a list of companies that were still doing business with Russia: Citigroup, Coca-Cola, Estee Lauder, Herbalife Nutrition, Hilton Hotels, Kimberly-Clark, McDonald's, Pepsi, Starbucks, etc. It's also it's kind of a false paradigm, because even though there's 1,000 companies, more than 1,000 companies listed, these are smaller subsidiary companies of, if you look at international business organizations like the Bilderberg Group, which is essentially, there's 5 major organizations that own almost every other organization. And what this is doing is, it's financially cutting Russia off from the West and forcing Russia to make partnerships in the East. If you can't go West, then you have to go East. I mean, it's a simple geography. And so if you can't make partnerships in the West, then you join with Russia. Sorry, you join with China. Russia joins with China and makes partnerships with China, because China doesn't care about anything at all. And if you consider the landmass size of China and the landmass size of Russia, I mean, that's huge. That's the largest single sort of global area on the planet. And also, if you can consider the population size of China and how many potential clients and customers you have there, that is huge, although it's a very strictly and tightly controlled regime, and a lot of information doesn't get out, and it's also even more corrupt than the West is corrupt. So it's crazy that there's so much pressure on these companies to stop doing business. And what is business? Business and trade is basically the avoidance of war. If you can't trade, you fight. That is human history. If you can't share and trade and do business, the only alternative is conflict, because business keeps you busy. That's what the word means. Business is the word busyness rewritten. Yeah. So business keeps you busy, and for as long as you are busy, you are another word for busy is occupied, as an occupation or job, and then you are doing something, hopefully constructive, productive, and you don't physically fight. You use your energy to solve problems that should help the world. So if you can't do business, if trade doesn't exist, the only alternative is conflict, because the only way to get things, if you can't trade with value, the only way to get things is to take them. And taking things from people leads to conflict. And so when people say you can't trade, you can't do business, well, that's war, that's conflict then, because you prevent people from doing or making a good future for themselves. You prevent people from developing, you prevent people from learning, you prevent people from growing, from building businesses to make profits, because it's much better to build a business than it is to fight a war, in theory, and it's much better for society, which is why democratic Western cultures and countries have seen less conflict over the last 70 years than at any other time in history, because we changed warfare, physical fighting, into commerce and trade, where the win and the lose was much less dramatic because you lost your job rather than losing your life, which was more beneficial for culture and allowed people and things to grow. As the freedom nature of trade disintegrates and people begin to not trade with each other, which is completely natural. You know, you have 10 sheep and I have 5 tables, and you know, you give me 2 sheep and I give you a table or something, you know, or something like that, or you give me 1 sheep and I give you 4 tables or something. You know, we build and we invest our time and energy and we trade, and that's what stops conflict, because we're actually able to build some kind of security into our own lives. And so this trade war that now exists, if not stopped quickly, will only escalate or grow. And if you want a historical example of that, look at the limitations placed on Germany at the end of the First World War. Now, the limitations placed on Germany, where it couldn't grow and trade at the end of the First World War, led to the growth of German nationalism and a resentment or anger at the fact that it couldn't grow and it couldn't trade and it couldn't do anything. And then the German National Socialists, together with other international political powers, used this to build up German industry and infrastructure and nationalism and aggression. And that's what led to the Second World War, which was World War I, Part 2. So the fact that you couldn't trade at the end of the war meant that people couldn't develop, people couldn't do anything. And they could only do what the government told them, and the government were very limited because they couldn't do anything outside of the country. It sort of became a nightmare that spiraled into various different economic depressions, and then led to World War II, because war and conflict is growth for the state, and more power for the state, and complete control for the state. So which also connects with the fact that the head of the British Army said this week, and I don't follow the news, but this was posted everywhere across social media, that that the main reason for joining the British Army was to train for war with Russia. Which is not what you want to hear anybody say, really, because it's far better to build businesses and trade, because there's a lot of people who, if you've got a good product, there's a lot of people who can use your good product, and there's no reason why, and that it shouldn't be used. And it's the companies that are continuing to trade, it's on various levels, but the companies that are continuing to trade that are stopping the war, because they're actually keeping people busy with business rather than making them desperate. Because if you're desperate, if you don't have work, you don't have a job. If you don't have a job, you don't have money. If you don't have money, you can't buy food and you can't live anywhere because you can't pay your energy bills. And so the only alternative there then is to buy a gun and to go out and steal. It's the only alternative that's left. There's no other road to go down. And you know, they call that the Road Warrior Mad Max scenario, where there is no economy except theft, and resources are scarce, and when resources are scarce, people fight over them, and whatever you do creates more of whatever you do naturally, so conflict just creates more conflict. And so it's very important from my perspective that large international companies continue to do trade in all areas of the world, because that's a lifeline, not just for the people who work in those companies. I mean, I imagine that big international companies that are in Russia are employing a large number of people as well, and it's not just the people; it's their families, it's their children, and it's a good example of how to do things. And telling people you can't sell to somebody because somebody else did something. I think there's going to be a much more peaceful transition of change and power if consumers are allowed to buy what they want to buy. And tastes and habits will change naturally, and there will be less conflict, as you would see in, for example, a football league where over time different teams are the better teams. Yeah, you don't you don't find the teams going out and killing each other because they put their energy into performing the tasks that they're paid to perform, which is to play football. And over time, different teams will be better naturally because of the rise and the fall of human development and growth, and good times produce weak men as hard times produce strong men. And there's always that sine wave of progress throughout history. Here's another point, that banning foreign companies from trading in your country, I mean, there might be a national security issue on one side, but which is understandable, because when you suddenly realize that all these foreign companies trading in our country are actually controlling everything, which is kind of what happens. That as companies lobby governments, it's completely natural. It's what they do. And lobbying is an exercise of control. And you could argue that perhaps companies have more control over governments than governments have over governments. We've seen a lot of examples of that recently. And also to a certain extent, companies are more flexible. They can come and they can go. They can cross borders, whereas governments are physically limited to one area, which is natural and logical, but limiting all the same. So it's sad what's happened. I think that people still don't see the bigger picture, and lobbying to take, basically this is lobbying to take jobs away from people, right? Stop your company trading in that country. Well, that's a lot of work for people. It's a lot of jobs for people, and why it's going to hurt the economy of that country a lot if thousands of companies don't do business. And potentially you create a problem for your company, because as everybody knows, once you've penetrated a new market, that's a great word, it's a ridiculous word, penetrate. Once you have penetrated a new market and you lose that market, it's very hard to get it back, because you've sort of lost the trust of the people, because business is trust, and you promise to deliver. And if you don't deliver anymore, then you lose the trust of people. And sometimes, as we both know, it takes a long time to build up contracts sometimes. You know, there's years of negotiation involved in the development of a contract. And then for some journalist or influencer somewhere to suddenly say, well, you shouldn't trade with that company. It's like, well, it just took us 2 years to sign a contract with these
Mm-hmm.
people. And now suddenly you want to tell us that it's not important anymore and you don't even work for us? It's bizarre, that whole aspect of everything, where one group of people want to tell everybody what they should do. Society is far better off when people regulate themselves to a certain extent, and their ability to work and their economic ability as well. I'm just looking through the list of companies here that have stopped their trades. It's a huge list.
Yeah.
It's an absolutely huge list. And, you've got pharmaceutical companies, you've got hotel chains, a lot of hotel chains. You've got food production, you've got agriculture, you've got machinery, you've got technology, employment, insurance, banking, domestic appliances. I'm surprised that Russia can function, right, without all of these, without the backing of all of these. Although Russia's probably quite happy that some of these are not there. It's really interesting. And of course, if a company's aim is to grow and to make profits, which I think in democratic society, that's the aim. The aim is the aim of the game is on one side to help people, but on the other side to make profit. And then you make a decision here not to make any profit at all. That doesn't make much sense either. And how do you, and then as I pointed out, how do you get it back? Once you lose business, how do you get it back? I mean, you're going to need really good contacts. You're going to need a lot of trust. You're going to need time. You got to put it. It's going to be expensive. So all of these companies are saying, we don't care. I think that keeping business flowing is extremely important, and it's the only. It also keeps communication going. And as long as you have communication, you have hope. When you stop communicating with people, then you can't progress at all, which is true for every aspect of life. That if there's no open road of communication, then nothing can progress. And there always needs to be new opportunities with communication in order for things to grow and stabilize. It's just that we need consistent changes because of the flow of life, right? So it's interesting, and there's a lot of pressure being put on a lot of countries for a lot of reasons, and it also goes to show how complicated everything is, because if you look at the list of companies that are still doing business in Russia, there are a broad spectrum of companies in a broad spectrum of areas, and all of them are important. And it reminds me of one of those, I used to have in my office a book of career opportunities. It was a book of a list of jobs. It was all the different kinds of jobs, all the main different kinds of jobs that exist in the world. And it was a huge book, and there was more than 1,000 pages in it with lists of different types of jobs. So it shows you the different kinds of opportunities that also exist, and the different things that people can do to make a living for themselves. So interesting. I'm sure that, or I hope that more companies will stay and do business than try to leave, because I don't, you know, it's, if one company sees, like, if basically if Burger King see McDonald's leave, then Burger King are just like, yay, you know, it's like, well, we'll probably have more customers then,
Yes.
because probably, I mean, there might be a brand change within McDonald's, but it's an opportunity to take over another segment of the market. So so why not? Why not use it to your advantage? People are oversimplifying the problem that exists, because war is always a breakdown of communication, as I explained earlier, and those, and it's exemplified. There's a John F. Kennedy quote: "Those who make peaceful change impossible make revolution inevitable," and revolution is a violent change. And there's a certain irrationality, and intelligent people see it very clearly. I mean, you don't tell your neighbor what to put in their fridge, right? It's a very simple analogy. You don't tell your neighbor what to buy in the shop. You don't tell your neighbor what clothes to wear. You don't tell your neighbor what to think. And yet it seems to be okay to try to dictate to people that you don't know, who are very far away from you, what they should do and how they should think about a very complicated topic. And the fact is, it's extremely complicated. These problems involve thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people, hundreds of thousands of organizations, structures of society, structures of history, culture, religion, and yet it can all be solved by putting a little flag next to your name. And when you put a little flag next to your name, everything is perfect. And it's more serious than a football game, you know. It is, and I think in the long term, it's going to make people tired of nationalities and tired of nationalism, which I think is one of the sub ideas of the whole process, is to get everybody very, very tired of nationalism and to make people think that nationalism is inherently negative. But you know, nationalism is just wall around your property to protect it, really. So I'm not sure that is, you know, nationalism is no different from corporatism. There's a symbol and everybody works for the benefit of the symbol, or what the symbol means. Yeah, which is an extension of a religious concept. But we're acting as if it's bad to be nationalistic, and I don't think it's good or bad to be nationalistic. It's just a thing, you know. It's is it good or bad that we live on a planet with lots of water? You know, it's just a thing. It doesn't really matter. Is it good or bad that we wear t-shirts? It doesn't really matter that much. Although if I wore a t-shirt with a Russian flag on it, I would instantly be banned from everywhere.
Mm.
That's just really weird. That's just really weird, and because of the type of character I am, I'm really tempted just to wear a t-shirt with a Russian flag on it, and just see, you know, it's a symbol of yeah, I might provoke other people, and people might say it's insensitive, but it's also a symbol of where we're at as a society and a culture. That if you're gonna scream at somebody because they wear a t-shirt, no, it's not really very smart. Yeah, because it's like banning a political party. The idea doesn't disappear. It just transforms into something else. Like the Germans, well, okay, what happened? The Germans banned the Nazi Party, National Socialism. What happened? Well, all the political candidates went to other parties, and they continued the same agenda under a different name. You know, just as we talked earlier about corporations changing whatever's at the front, right? So, say, example, McDonald's leaves Russia, so another entity will fill its place, and also it caused a lot of when Germans banned National Socialism, a lot of the National Socialists moved to other countries and continued their National Socialism in other countries. So it just caused it to spread. A lot of them went to Austria, a lot of them went to Belgium, a lot of them went to France, a lot of them went to join the Democratic Party in the United States, which is why the Democratic Party has the problems that it has right now. It took a long time historically for them to evolve, but there's it's a controversial statement, but there's very little difference between the American Democratic Party and the National Socialist Party in Germany pre-World War II. They're very, very similar in their orientation and their principles, and their funding as well, because you work for whoever pays you, right? That's the bottom line at the end of the day. And the smart gangsters pay other people to do the hits. Right? They never do the hits themselves. They always pay somebody else to do the wet work or the dirty jobs, as they say. So it's pretty it's pretty interesting. And we have to be very careful. Most people have to be very careful what they say in the modern world. I cross over the lines because somebody has to cross the lines and somebody has to take the hits, and the number of strikes and videos that I've had banned from the internet, the number of platforms that I've been banned from because I will challenge what people think, not tell people what to think. It's quite interesting. Anyway, yeah, there's people have to ask themselves very, very simple questions like if a top world rock band like U2 can play a concert in a war zone, is there really a war? If top political leaders can walk through the cities of a war zone, is there really a war? You've got to be able to ask yourselves these questions and see how much is real, because some of it is real, and how much is theater, because some of it is theater as well. And I don't think we'll ever know the answer to which is which. And it's always the civilians that pay the price at the end of the day. And it's sad, really. We will see where it all ends up, whether Russia decides to jump onto the World Economic Forum agendas, or decides not to, which depends on what kind of leadership it has, really, and whether or not you like the leaders, because it's all about personality now. It's all about actors, really, isn't it? Since we had Ronald Reagan as American president in the 1980s, who was an actor, I think we've had a bit of a problem in the West with cultural icons and their meanings, because people love people they don't know or don't understand, and then because they love them, they can't accept criticism of them. So people who follow Trump can't accept criticism of Trump. People who follow Biden can't accept criticism of Biden. People who followed Obama can't accept criticism of Obama. It's very much a cult of personality now, which is not really political at all. It's all cultural. You can't criticize the gods, basically. Anyway, let's move forward. That was